that girl, and I wanted to date this girl, and he wanted to date that girl. And my mom laughed and said in a raspy voice that real men love for a lifetime, not just for a moment. All the girls are like, oh, oh. All the guys are like, shut up, man, shut up, man. Come on, don't mess it up for me, Mr. Speaker, don't mess it up. She says, real men love for a lifetime, not just for a moment. Even another time I was in college and I was frustrated and I wanted to quit, and I called home and she said, son, it's not how you start, it's what? It's how you finish. And she says, don't just finish well in college, finish well in life. And my challenge to you is, who's the person in your lives that is trying to encourage you to finish well? Who's the person in your life that's trying to help you to break any barrier that's possible? Who's the person in your life? Is it a teacher trying to push you? Is it a coach showing you what it truly means to be a student athlete? Not just an athlete portion, but the student. Is it a grandparent? Is it your parents? Is it an advisor? Who's the person that's saying it's not how you start? Don't just finish well in this organization. Don't just finish well after high school or college, but finish well in your life. And in our lives, and in my life, my mom was that person who was removing those mental handcuffs. Even when my father wasn't there to say anything negative about him, she would always speak positive and encourage me to stay positive. Because she knew that one day we could be better men than he was. And even when my father was released from prison, and he was still out there doing dumb stuff, making bad decisions. How many of you know people who constantly make bad decisions? Oh yeah. They might be thinking about making a bad decision right now. And my mom, she was in my life and she served as my role model. But my dad seemed as though he was my arch role model. So everything I would try to do right, my dad would do wrong. And my dad couldn't even recognize that my mom was the person in his life saying it's not how you start, but it's how you finish. But yet my dad, once released from prison and released early for good behavior in prison, he still couldn't be the father he needed to be. He couldn't be the man he needed to be, and continue to use substances and continue to navigate away from his family and continue to make bad mistake after bad mistake and feeling hopeless and disappointed. And even when you're at your lowest, there's always hope. But my dad couldn't recognize that. And after a long list and strand of bad decisions, on February 20th, 2004, he made his last bad decision. Feeling depressed, feeling stressed, feeling hopeless, feeling as though he's never been the person he was destined to be. He's never broke the barriers that he needed to break. He walks to the Lee Bridge in Richmond, Virginia. And if you were there, you could hear the sound of cars and horns passing in the background. He steps up on a sidewalk. With his hands, he placed it on the top rail. And with his left foot, he placed it on the bottom rail with his right foot firmly planted on the concrete. He looks off into the distance and began to think about all the decisions that he made and his shoulda, woulda, couldas. He took a breath. And he leaned over and took his own life. Tears began to roll down my eyes as I watched the 6 o'clock news. As the unidentified man was being pulled out of the James River by the local authorities. And it's amazing because I've watched the news hundreds of times. But today it was my situation, my household, my father. And as I sat there and watched the news and tears was coming out of my eyes, my mom was with me and she wrapped her arms around me. And she asked me one question. She says, Now, how strong are you? And I said, I feel about as strong as a pretzel. So the next day, I walked to the same Lee Bridge in Richmond, Virginia. And if you were there, you could have heard the sound of cars and horns passing in the background. And you could still see the black fingerprint dust on the rails from the police. And so I stepped up on the sidewalk, and with my hands, I placed it in the same spot that my father had placed his hands. With my left foot, I placed it on the bottom rail, and with my right foot, I had it firmly planted on the concrete. I looked off into the distance, and I began to think over my life. And I began to think about all the things that went right, all the things that went wrong. I took a deep breath, and I opened my eyes, and I was reminded of that promise that I made to my dad in that courtroom, that I won't end up like you. I said, I won't end up like you. See, that day I had to make a decision in my life that my past doesn't determine my future.